Yeah. I'm in Torquay. That's a surfing village paradise, or so I hear, in Victoria, near Melbourne, about an hour from Melbourne. Took my car today. It was a day off I had. Uh, yeah, it's a Monday, so it isn't too full. And I'm probably gonna go around to the Great Ocean Road eventually. Still today, like maybe an hour from now, maybe half an hour from now, maybe just after I shoot this video. I don't know. But what I wanted to talk to you about is, well, since I'm in Australia and since I've been working here for a bit, is why wages in Australia are probably higher than you thought they would be, especially like for lower level workers. If you just saw like data online without actually talking to people and without actually coming here, because well, I think everyone knows that Australia has pretty good wages in general. It was known a while back for having like the highest minimum wage in the world. And it's true if you do like a country to country comparison, depending on how the exchange rates are. But it isn't true like on an individual level. For example, the city of Geneva in Switzerland actually has a 25 franc per hour minimum wage, which is significantly higher than the, well, as of 2024, 24, 25 Australian dollars an hour that we have here in Australia. But that is misleading for a couple of reasons. First, because, well, Geneva is literally one city in one rich country, right? Australia, the minimum wage is like that for all, what, 27, 28 million residents in the country. So that's the first difference. But the other difference is, in fact, most contracts here in Australia, they're what they call a casual contract. And a casual contract just means that you're not only working for that employer, you don't really have that strong of a bond. And what most people I've seen here, immigrants and otherwise, have is they have more than one job. And so they alternate between jobs. And so their contracts to each employer individually is a casual employment. And that actually legally, you're obligated to offer an add-on of 25% on top of the minimum wage. So, whereas in theory the minimum wage would be like 24, $25 an hour, I literally know no one, like not a single person who earns more than $31 an hour, which is the 25% increment on the casual contract. And that's something that doesn't exist. Like even if you're working part-time in other countries in America and New Zealand and the UK, there isn't that 25% add-on. And so just right off the bat, that's like a significant increase. The second change is what they call superannuation, which I guess for Americans would be more or less the equivalent of a Roth IRA or yeah, like individual retirement accounts, 401k, that kind of vibe. And uh, the difference here is it's mandatory and it's on top of your salary. So whereas like in many countries it would be taken away from your wage, here it's actually added on top of what you earn. So if you're earning, well, let's say you're earning the minimum casual contract rate, which would be around, let's put it, $30 an hour, you're actually getting an extra 10%, well, 11.5% actually, on top of that into your retirement account, which, well, would make your actual wage be around $33. So you can see how it's misleading because you see online and it's 24, 25. You see, okay, that's a good wage, but when you convert it to USD to euros, it's a good wage, but it's not like that much of a difference. But when you get that 25% extra on casual rates, and then the 10 to 11% extra on superannuation, it makes a significant difference. And that's not it. We still have more to talk about because in many countries there aren't actually different rates for when you're working, whereas here there are penalties, obligatory penalties for working after midnight and also for working on weekends and on public holidays. So even though my base wage is around $35, I was working last Tuesday and it was the Melbourne Cup, and so it was literally doubled. Instead of 35 an hour, I got 63 an hour. So I could be making around like 500 to $600 in a day, just because I was working a rent and public holiday. And of course, in most other countries, it doesn't really work like that. So, like I said, 25% extra rate on casual work, the 11.5% superannuation that you get for your retirement, which is, well, it is still money coming in. You can decide how to invest it, and if you leave Australia, if you're a temporary resident, you can actually withdraw that. So that is, well, just honestly part of your savings, if you think about it. Um, then there's those penalties, those extra uh, perks that you get for working weird hours, or for working hours, or for just working public holidays like Christmas, like New Year's, but also like random public holidays that they kind of have here depending on the state you live in. I'm living in Victoria, so it would be like the eve before, like the day before the AFL finals or a Melbourne Cup or whatever. But there's most of them are like on a national level, I think. You'd have to look at it on the particular state that you're in. And last but not least, there's the fact that in many countries you get minimum wage by default. So what I mean by that is sorry. What I mean by that is, if the minimum wage is, I don't know, $15 an hour, that's what you're gonna get. Whereas here, like I see a lot of employers where they actually do pay more. So the minimum wage for this job that I'm doing, one of them, it would be 31 an hour, but I actually get 35, and that's a very sweet deal. Like every day you're working, like for every 5 hours you're working in a day, for example, you get like 20 extra bucks, and it adds up. It adds up. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about. Though I will say this, especially for Americans, Canadians, Irish people, you might come here and you might think that, well, if wages are that good, then tips on top of that will be insane. But that's not actually how it works. Tipping culture here is very, very weak. I've been working here in hospitality for a couple months. Given I'm not like not a hot chick who can like show her breasts or anything. That might help you get tips, I guess. But unlike for normal people, I'd say it's very rare to get tips, depending on the place you're working. I hear casinos, you might get some tips, but so far in 2 3 months of work, I have literally not gotten a single tip, which kind of well, it lowers your wage if you come from a country that pays very good tips. So like in America, it could be getting like $15 an hour or 18 or 20. But honestly, tips just double that to the point where you're getting 30, 35, even $40 an hour US dollars for that. If you actually convert it and get those tips and divide by the number of hours that you worked. So yeah, here you're not gonna get that. Like well, if you like I said, if you work at a casino, if you work at like fine dining, you might get some. It's not gonna be as much as America. It's not gonna be as much as Canada. And from what I hear, even though I've never worked there, it's not gonna be as much as Ireland either, because Ireland they like to tip a lot as well. So. Yeah, those are definitely some things to take into consideration, and it was something that was always weird to me, in New Zealand, for example, minimum wage would be around like 22, 23 New Zealand dollars an hour. I don't remember. And then here it would be like $24 an hour. And I'd hear about all those Kiwis coming from New Zealand to Australia. I'm like, no way, there's no way that it's worth it to like fly across the Tasmanian Sea, 3 to 4 hours away, just for like a couple extra dollars, even when you do like the exchange rate conversions and all that. But well, this is actually the reason. The superannuation, the casual rates, the penalties here are much better than even New Zealand, and it's also much better than like England. From what I hear, it's better than Ireland, even if you factor in the tipping. And well, when you get even to like Southern European countries, Spanish people, Portuguese people, Italians, they come here and they're crazy. They're like, oh, I'm earning 3 times as much as I earned back home. So if you're entitled to like a working holiday, something like that, definitely put that into your consideration. Purchasing power here is insane, and if you come from England, if you come from Ireland, things aren't even that much more expensive here, to be honest. If you come from, well, Southern Europe, then it's going to be a little bit like different, and if you come from America, it's probably going to be a little less expensive here than where you're living, depending on where you are from in America, obviously. But yeah, just thought I'd share that with you. It's a beautiful day. Probably gonna keep walking around, and then yeah, I'll shoot some other videos in the Great Ocean Road. Goodbye.